So once you guys have broken up your photo into its different values, now you can start trying to paint, all right? One thing you may wanna do is check to see that you have stopped your lines at the tape division. And if you took off the tape, sometimes it's really helpful to put the tape back on, especially if you kind of get involved in your work and you might accidentally forget not to go over that line, okay? So just to remind myself, I'm gonna put the tape back down. This is an optional step, okay, just so you know. And if you do this, you don't wanna push very hard, just light pressure, okay? So now what you can do is start with some of your lightest grays, okay? Just to give you a little flash forward, here is the example that I painted this morning in class, okay? So what I'm gonna start with is some of my very lightest areas, and then I will work my way up slowly into these dark areas. I will show you how to blend right there, and then how to separate your different petals or overlapping parts of your leaf. So I'm gonna start with water in my palette, and I've got a little more in one section and a little less in the other, and then I wanna grab my India ink and make myself a couple of grays. Now, I keep my tester paper handy so that I can continuously be sure that I have the right value going before I paint it on the paper. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of this ink mixture and mix it into my water, and then I'll check and see how I did just by going like this. It's kind of dark for the first step. So what I might actually do instead, this is another little quick trick. You can just load your brush up with this mixture that you find a little too dark. And then right here, I've got some extra water. So now I just do this, okay? And I can almost make a way lighter version. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that you can kind of mix different ratios with your ink and your water. That's a lot lighter, okay? So sometimes you gotta play around with the ratio and how much of each do you actually need before you're happy and settled on something. Okay, so that's a pretty good beginning light gray. So I'm gonna go ahead and use it. And if you remember back to basic art and back to your value practice, you have got to show all those different parts of the value diagram. Highlight, light gray midtones, middle mid-gray midtones, your shadows, and your reflected light, okay? Pay attention to where things overlap. That's really when you wanna start using your lightest grays, okay? So looking at my photo, I've got just a little bit of that reflected light over here, and I really like to paint that in first. Now, I don't need to coat the entire petal, okay? I'm gonna be making some different mixtures of dark and light grays, and I'm going to be using it more in that manner, okay? So just to get started, I'm going to kind of separate my petals with a little bit of that reflected light, and then I have to start letting this dry. Okay, so my first layer on here is not going to be very dark at all. It's gonna be, where are my light grays, okay? Be mindful of going kind of into undesired areas and keep your puddle of ink or water mixture contained within its own area of value. If you remember back to basic art, the water and the ink mixture will travel into any areas of the wet paper, okay? So if you don't wet the paper in a certain spot, you are not gonna have to worry about it running in and kind of blurring. Now, also, my flower petal has a lot of streakiness with the highlights, so I also kind of take the light gray and I start to map out some of those textures. And here's where the tape is helpful to me because I can kind of remember where I'm at as far as moving into the positive side of my drawing, okay? And again, just kind of take a look at your photo. I'm gonna start mapping in with my brush some of those textural areas. Okay, so that's kind of how I start the painting, is with light grays. Now, at a certain point, I've got to stop what I'm doing and let this dry, okay? Just gonna finish up a little bit more in here. Okay, and I just kind of keep looking over at my photo to make sure that I'm in the right area and that I'm not accidentally going into any super dark or super light areas that I need to work on later, okay? If there's any highlights or white spots, this is the time to let the gray kind of go around that and preserve your white paper, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let this first layer dry, and then I'm gonna start adding my second one, okay? But right now, it needs some dry time.